You were never meant for a small life. You have bold ideas, audacious dreams, and visions that keep you up at night. But the truth is, big goals don't come with step-by-step instructions, and success doesn't come from doing more. It comes from becoming more. Welcome to Big Goal Energy, a podcast for high-achieving women who are done shrinking, striving, and second-guessing, and are ready to defy reality in pursuit of the life they actually want. I'm your hostess, Bri Seeley, goal architect, subconscious strategist, and your permission slip to want what you want. Join me as we go beyond the surface level success to explore the mindset, identity, and inner work required to bring your biggest, most delulu goals to life. This is your space to be seen, to be expanded, and to remember that you are not alone on this journey. Let's get into it. Big Goal Energy, I have a huge gift for you today. Kelly Schexnaildre and I met because if you've been in my world for any period of time, Annie P. Ruggles connected with Kelly on LinkedIn. And then I was in New Orleans and I was like, I must meet this hot sauce concierge that you keep telling me about. And so Annie introduced me to Kelly. We had an incredible conversation when I was there in October. We've stayed connected. We've had multiple other masterminds and conversations. We've been going through kind of similar things in 2025. And I wanted to bring her story to you, which is rare because I don't often do one-on-one interviews on this platform. But she and I had just such potent conversations about things like failure and things like bankruptcy and how do you reignite yourself after a massive ending and closure. And I just couldn't not have this conversation. So Kelly, welcome to Big Goal Energy.
Right on, Bri. Thank you for having me. I can't believe we met in October. It in some ways feels like it's been so long, and in some ways feels like, oh my God, I met you yesterday. So the fact that it was almost 3 months ago is insane.
I know so much has happened in the last 90 days. But I want to back up. You launched a business. Will you tell us the story of your business up until March of 2020? I want to stop there, and then we're going to reframe a little bit.
Absolutely. So I started a hot sauce company called Murph's Condiments when I was 26 in January of 2014. I was young and working at restaurants, and I had a bachelor's degree in communications and really didn't know what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I just mystified about that for a long time. But I knew in my heart of hearts that I didn't want to work for anybody else. My dad's an entrepreneur. He has a consulting business where he's the acting CFO of more than 40 companies. I watched him build that business from my living room table from the ground up. And him and I are pretty darn similar. And I just knew that, I don't really like authority. I want to own all of my own time. I'm very self-driven. It's easy to get me to do things. I'm disciplined. And so I knew that I needed a business that was going to be totally and completely mine. And I stumbled upon craft hot sauce because I had a huge garden in my backyard in Denver. So I was living in Denver in this cute little rent house. I had a huge backyard and I was growing all sorts of vegetables, lettuces, peppers, tomatoes, eggplant, squash, etc. And what do you do when you have a ton of extra produce in your garden? You make condiments, right? You can a bunch of stuff. So for a few years there, I was just doing a ridiculous amount of canning, just spending hours and hours of time in my kitchen at the end of the summer, making all sorts of things. And I started making hot sauce. I had a buddy give me a half a bushel of peaches because most people don't know the Colorado state fruit is the peach because we grow a ton of peaches on the western slopes. I got some peaches and I didn't want to make preserves or pie or any sort of other sweet treats. And so I made a peach habanero hot sauce. That sort of recipe creation dovetailed with me feeling really grumpy about the available hot sauce on the market. So at the time in 2014, really, we had Cholula, we had Tapatio, we had Tabasco, and we had the traditional sriracha that everybody loves. I just thought, oh my God, hot sauce can be way better than this. I was bored. Nothing was spicy enough. A lot of it was made with sugar or powdered chilies, and I just wasn't really all that into it. So I wrote the peach habanero hot sauce recipe and started eating that and giving it away as Christmas gifts. And I mean, it just steamrolled from there. It was like I wrote one recipe, people couldn't get enough. And that was in summer of 2012. So I started the business in 2014. And I just love food. I just knew that I had a knack for making all sorts of condiments, and hot sauce is one of two condiments that are on tables at restaurants, right? You got ketchup and hot sauce. And I thought, well, I'm going to do hot sauce because I had a buddy at the time who had just launched a ketchup business. I started selling at the farmer's market. And after that, I said, I'm going to do some cold call sales. That's the key to my future. So on Tuesdays, I would pick like a neighborhood in Denver and I would identify 6 to 10 restaurants in my target market. I'd throw a couple of cases of hot sauce in my car and I would go around and I would say, hey, my name's Kelly. I make hot sauce. I want to talk to the general manager or the head chef. And we would have some samples. And then on Wednesdays, I would do all the follow-ups from the week before. So I was religious about cold call sales for 2.5, 3 years. I still believe today that it's the best way to grow a business is that really getting out there and talking to people. And no matter what you're doing, services, products, or otherwise, getting out and talking to people, meeting them, letting them know what you're about. In the first 3 years, I went from no wholesale accounts to working at farmers markets to 150 wholesale accounts, most of those being restaurants. And I worked myself into a distribution problem, an accounting problem, a production problem. I was working 100 hours a week and not getting it all done, crying in my Cheerios, never had a day off. Plus working my restaurant jobs, right? Because I was making money with Murph's, but I wasn't at a spot where I could really fully transition to being full time. So I'm making my cash at the restaurants and I'm doing Murph's at every other available opportunity. I just grew it and grew it. I used those restaurants, those 150 restaurants to get into Shamrock Foods distribution, which is a big regional food distributor. I also leveraged those partnerships to get into Cisco, which we're all familiar, Cisco Foods. From partnerships with those two large distributors, I was able to grow and end up having my products distributed at more than 700 restaurants across like the regional West. So we were selling a lot of hot sauce and just having a good time. I had my own manufacturing facility. I had a full staff. I was fully self-employed by age 30, which was my dream, to be fully self-employed, working for myself, age 30, nobody else telling me what to do. I was just living the dream in Denver, this like little mini hot sauce celebrity and just having the time of my life. And really, it just took a lot of resilience, a lot of tenacity, a lot of persistence, a lot of hard work. It was fun. I had a good time.
Obviously, we all know what March 2020 was. And if you were paying attention, you just heard Kelly say that the majority of her business was 700 restaurants. And Denver was definitely one of those areas, very similarly to New York, that locked down and things were closed. Talk to us about what happened to your business.
I think it was March 16th or 17th, Colorado said, all food service and related establishments have to close, right? With no pending reopening date, and 85% of my revenue disappeared overnight. There was nothing I could do. It was bottles on tables at restaurants was how I made most of my money. And so my revenue disappeared overnight, right? So catastrophic loss of revenue. At the same time, as we all know, food prices and input prices, supply chain disruptions, all of my inputs, ingredients, packaging, shipping, everything that you use to make, sell, produce, and ship hot sauce tripled. My profit margin completely dried up, right? All my inputs tripled and I had a catastrophic loss of revenue. And I think what was interesting about being a restaurant adjacent business or a restaurant supply business is that even though the restaurants came back online 10 weeks or 12 weeks later, we weren't allowed to put bottles on tables at restaurants. I still wasn't getting any orders because nobody was allowed to touch bottles, cross-contamination. And so a lot of the restaurants I was working with weren't reordering. And the ones that were reordering, I had to update all of my prices. I went from selling products at $27 a case to my distributor, landed to the customer between $36 and $42 for a 12-pack case of hot sauce, which is super reasonable for a free giveaway that's on the table for the customer to enjoy, to having to sell into my distributors at $42 a case, right? So landed to the customer, we're now at $60 a case, $5 a bottle for a free giveaway. And it's just in an industry that got completely crippled, catastrophic loss of revenue, having to close, no idea what to do. They weren't going to be able to pay this higher amount for this craft hot sauce.
Adding on to that all of their prices were then also going up. To think already this kind of like line item that they're having to pay for, and now their margins have shrunk. And so having that extra line item within their margins now becomes just untenable. Versus before, it was like a nice to have, a nice benefit, nice add, and now it's just not even an option.
Yeah, absolutely. The selling point for Murph's was a local craft, affordable quality product. Most of our chili peppers were grown on farms in the state of Colorado. We used fresh, whole ingredients, which is what set our hot sauce apart. And the cool thing is pre-COVID, I was able to go into restaurants and go, hey, guess what? You can have a local quality product for less a case than you're currently purchasing Tabasco, the national brand, right? My product was positioned less expensive than Tabasco delivered to the customer. And so it was a no-brainer for people to switch. And as soon as it became cost prohibitive and the whole industry got upended, it's no longer about serving that local quality product. It's about, oh my God, my business is about to fail. I got to go back to serving Cholula because people will eat it and it's the cheapest option on the market. The combination of those two things just crippled my business. I did everything I could to try to save it, but ultimately, even selling it, increasing my prices, selling it in Shamrock and Cisco at $42 a case, I went from making 45% gross profit to making about 25% gross profit. And my insurance had also tripled and my rent had tripled. And so all of these overhead costs that was getting paid by that 45% is not getting paid by 25.
Through all of that, when did the idea that you may have to close, when did that come up? And what was your first initial reaction to that? And then walk me through how you made that decision to say it's time.
Man, that's a good question. I don't remember the first time I thought, oh, I'm going to have to close this. I think that I was so committed to saving it because it was my baby. I'd started when I was 26. I'd worked whole its time to get it off the ground and money was falling from the literal sky. December of 2019, January of 2020, February of 2020. I doubled my revenue from the previous February, one of my slowest months, to go from this high. We had our best year yet. Things just could not have been better to an instantaneous fall down the side of Mount Everest. It was just hard to swallow. And for a long time, probably a couple of years, I couldn't accept, oh my God, this must be over. I thought, oh, I've got enough customers that love my brand. The restaurants are going to come back in a big way, right? All the supply chain stuff's going to ease up. I really allowed myself to believe that things were maybe going to change. I was living in a little bit of denial or hope, whichever you want to call it, for I don't know, probably 2 or 3 years, but the financials told the truth, right? We just kept recording loss for loss. And I think at the end of 2023, I knew like I was running out of money and ability to play the game and frankly, any emotional capacity. Ended 2023, I thought, I don't think this business is going to survive. God, the emotions of that, to work so hard for something, to have really made such a success of myself, to have busted onto the Denver food scene right as it was just riding the wave to the top and Denver was getting bigger, badder, bolder, and everybody just could hang on to those coattails and sail to the top. It was a cool time to be in Denver and to be a young entrepreneur. And I was devastated. When I think of it now, I still, even though I believe everything happens exactly as it's supposed to, it still hurts my feelings so bad. And I think, oh my God, what would my life be like if I hadn't lost my business through COVID? Some days it's easier to swallow than others. It feels like such a tragedy. And look, I was deeply and darkly depressed for years. I feel like in a lot of ways, 2024 was when I really started to come out of that hole. It took me a long time to feel emotionally right after something so catastrophic. It was just devastating.
I get a lot of questions from people that are like, how do you know that it's time? I always tell people, if you're still questioning it, probably not time yet. I know that if I'm like, is this, versus all 3 times I've closed businesses, it's been like, this is it. It was more of a definitive statement rather than a question. Aside from numbers, was there something that let you know that it was definitively time where you stopped questioning it?
Running out of money was the definitive, it's time to close, but that coincided with a decision internally that I just knew that I couldn't take it anymore. That I had tried everything in my power, resources, ideas, leveraged my community. I tried every strategy under the sun to save it. And I knew that I just didn't have anything left in the tank. So I think that the running out of money coincided with just that I'm done. The feeling of I just can't keep pushing this boulder uphill. It was like I was the captain of a ship with a hole in the hull that was so big that there was just nothing I could do to ever patch it. It was like I would stop one leak in one area and something else would open up or something would get more expensive. And so it was about being emotionally done. I got sober in 2013. When I think about how we talk a lot about in recovery, how you have to hit bottom, how you have to really just go, oh my God, there's nothing else I can do. And I have to try a new way and I have to start over. And I hit bottom with MRFs. I hit bottom emotionally with MRFs. And I just knew that at some point there was just going to be nothing I could do to save it. I hit bottom probably end of 2023, spent a lot of 2024 just wrapping things up, transitioning the business, running out of inventory and just slowly letting it die. I couldn't really make a decision on definitively, oh, I'm going to close the doors. I had a lot of inventory. I had a lot of other things to take care of. But yeah, I think it's a personal decision to close a business. And I think that when something changes in your heart, you go, I can't do this anymore.
One of the things that Kelly and I first connected on when we first sat down and had this delicious Mediterranean New Orleans, it was amazing. I still think back to, and the weather was perfect. We sat outside. It was like this whole cacophony of brilliance that day. But one of the things that I haven't talked about too publicly yet is that last year I was deeply considering filing for bankruptcy. To anyone that's ever faced that, you probably know there's a lot of shame involved in that decision or even like saying the words, which is why I haven't said the words on a forum like this until now. When I met with Kelly, she was like, oh, I did it. Like, best decision I've ever made. File the paperwork next week. Now, my particular circumstances was not necessary, actually then was ineligible for it, like all sorts of things. But talk to me about this, because what I learned through just doing my research and kind of figuring out what my options were, bankruptcy is actually a strategy that rich people use on purpose. Yet people that are at our level are thought like, oh, it's so shameful and it's this black mark that will follow you around forever and you'll be branded as a terrible failure for the rest of your life. So talk to me about your decision making to get to that point and why you say it's one of the best things that you've done.
This is my first time really talking about it super publicly too, because there is such shame and stigma attached to it. You tell people you filed for bankruptcy and it's a little bit like you've got leprosy. The reality is that in order to survive the COVID-19 pandemic, because I thought it was going to be survivable, I took out a really sizable economic injury disaster loan from the SBA. And so one of the cool things about the SBA is that they do, when economic disasters happen, roll out huge chunks of cash at a 3.75% interest rate so that businesses can borrow cash to survive whatever economic disruption there's been. They use for hurricanes, things like COVID, pandemics, etc. I leveraged the SBA as a resource because I thought, oh, if I borrow some cash in the short term, I can use that cash to pay my operating expenses, keep the lights on and get some inventory produced and ride out this storm. I borrowed the cash on the false assumption that the world was somehow going to go back to normal post-COVID. And I borrowed quite a bit of money that required me to sign a personal guarantee saying that, look, if the business defaulted, that Kelly Schexnaildre was personally responsible to pay back this note. In addition to that SBA loan, I borrowed I had a line of credit and a couple of other sources. And it was all stuff that I was using really to maintain my own economic stability, but also just to fund MRF's condiments through the years of just this catastrophic revenue loss, the drying up of our profits. What I used the bulk of the money for was to try to pivot into the grocery industry, right? So I hired brokers. I had a whole digital marketing strategy to really ramp up my e-commerce. I did a lot of social media. Most of it was spent in broker fees, digital marketing, social media. I mean, anything to pivot my revenue streams, right? And I signed personal guarantees for all of it. And it was debt that was solely the responsibility of the business to pay back. And so bankruptcy was one of those things where I had to do it. Otherwise, I was going to be on the hook for hundreds of thousands of dollars in loan repayment for something that I ultimately believed was not my fault. One of the things that I am fond of saying, and that I want to go on record saying here, is that I find it really interesting that the government robbed me of all the economic opportunity that I had created for myself and then turned me into a paid customer by loaning me money at an interest rate. And I just think that it's frankly predatory. The whole thing that happened with SBA economic injury disaster loans was predatory. There's just no scenarios where government should be allowed to rob me of my economic opportunity and then turn me into a paying customer. Under no circumstances was I going to personally take the fall for that. Through no fault of my own, my business got completely and utterly destroyed and ripped out from under me. And bankruptcy was the way out of that. It has had some pretty interesting personal consequences. It's really interesting to live a life where you can't have a credit card. Not that I was using credit cards in any meaningful way, but they're useful for a lot of things that I didn't really know until I was like, oh, I can't fucking have a credit card. It also forced me to liquidate my personal savings, right? All of this emergency cash that I had saved up over the years from things other than MRFs, just to ensure that if anything happened to me, that I wouldn't be homeless or starving or some other such thing. And so I had to spend all of that money, and I have this stain on my record for the next 7 years. That being said, as soon as I filed for bankruptcy, I felt an enormous relief. I'd been carrying around this monkey on my back for a long time with this business debt that I couldn't pay back. And look, in a perfect world, I would have been able to pay it back 10 times over, because that would have meant my business would have survived and that something would have shook out that would have meant some really big success. But it set me free. Filing for bankruptcy set me free. And I'm grateful that it's a resource. I was feeling really shamed about it initially, but I think that once I started reading about pretty much every entrepreneur's filed bankruptcy, at least once, if not twice or three times, it was like, bankruptcy exists for a reason. And you're right that the rich use all sorts of economic and financial tools at their disposal, and that the rest of us, I think, should really follow suit. So it's been all right. Look, I didn't have any personal debt, and I had an 810 credit score when I filed for bankruptcy. So it really hurt my feelings to file for bankruptcy, but it just is what it is. I was forced into an impossible position.
Well, and just to reflect back, what I heard you say was that you didn't just take this money, squander it, and then be like, not my problem. You took this money, you did what entrepreneurs do, you attempted to pivot, you tried new revenue streams, you were very forward thinking in terms of like, how do I make this work? I had to have a call with one of my credit card companies to get on a payment plan last year. And the guy said the most offensive thing. I'm not easily offended. And this guy was like, maybe you should just work on your profit and loss. And I was like, dude, the fuck do you think I've spent this year doing? When your revenue goes down 80%, where do you think my energy and attention has gone all day, every day? And I love that you took this resource and tried to make lemonade out of lemons.
Right.
And ultimately, it didn't work, which could we all have tried harder? Maybe. But I got to the point last year, too. You and I met the day that two different people told me to take a sabbatical, because they were like, you can't keep going. Like, you are unwell. So could we have tried harder? Maybe. But also, could we have tried harder? Maybe not. There's so much that gets wrapped up into all of this. And then we make all these things that have happened mean things about us as well. It just becomes this huge cacophony. So touched on it briefly. And if you feel like you've answered it sufficiently, you don't have to re-answer it. But how do you feel like you navigated some of those feelings and beliefs about closing your business, quote unquote, failing, filing for bankruptcy?
The limiting beliefs that I was really struggling with March 2020 onward were, oh my God, I did all this work and it was for nothing. That was one. I had just been working my nuts, and it hadn't meant anything. It could just be ripped away from me. Number two, after a few years of trying anything I could think of that I thought would make a difference in pivoting or increasing revenue, I threw some spaghetti at the wall about it, right? Because I was desperate and I was really interested ultimately in the survival of this business I had created. And I felt like a failure. I felt, oh my God, all of my best ideas didn't get me anywhere, didn't move the needle, which really isn't true, right? If I go back and look at the success I had and some of the strategies I implemented, there were a few things that ultimately contributed to them not working. It had nothing to do with me being a personal failure or not having good ideas. It was like that the hot sauce market was super saturated, that Amazon takes a lot of cash and a lot of knowledge to be able to play in that space and play well. Same thing in digital marketing, Facebook ads, and all this other stuff. The biggest thing I had was more of a question, less of a limiting belief of, if I'm not the hot sauce boss, who am I? I've had this whole identity. I was young. I didn't know my ass from my elbow when I started MRFs. I was 26. And so I didn't know who I was really. And then I thought, I own this hot sauce company. I don't even know what I'm good at anymore. When my identity came into question, so did all of the things that I was good at. And so the limiting beliefs was like, oh my God, I'm never going to be anybody ever again. I've hit my peak and I'm never going to achieve this kind of success again. A lot of my identity got shattered. A lot of just generally my ego, my pride just really got damaged. I was somebody in the world of somebodies. And then all of a sudden I could not figure out how to achieve that again or be there. And then this third piece of what the hell am I going to do now? What did I do? Really, I'm an avid fan of journaling. I meditate, doing a lot of breath work, somatically moving a lot of things through my system. What I really realized is that in addition to losing my business, I got divorced in the same year and I left Colorado right after having lived there for 11 years. So I left my community, I got divorced, and I lost my business all within 8 months of each other. It was so devastating emotionally on so many different levels. But I stuck to my recovery. I stayed sober. I leveraged my spiritual elders. I kept talking on the phone to my friends and staying connected in community, journaling, meditation, exercise, communing with spirit, and just no matter what, waking up every day and going, I'm going to live another day and I'm going to see what I can do to make the best of it. I think that there was just a lot of, this isn't the end. It's not okay. And it isn't the end. And I'm going to wake up every day and see if I can make something new. And I think just in the grieving process, some of it is just waking up every day and putting one foot in front of the other. Sometimes there's just not a whole lot you can do. I'm not going to meditate myself out of grief, and I'm not going to breath work my way out of grief. Sometimes really the work is, can I integrate this into my being? Can I sit with it? Can I hold the heaviness of it? Can I just cry in my Cheerios for half the morning and just release? I mean, I could cry now thinking about how devastated I was for all that time. There's just something to be said for feeling your feelings, that a lot of the times that the only way out is through, that once you come through to the other side, you'll be really glad that you leaned in, that you didn't drink it away or relationship it away or eat it away or gamble it away or whatever it is that your favorite escape mechanism may be. That sometimes life's just about, it's being present with what is. It's always about being present with what is. I wanted to use these years of immense reorganization in my life to rise like a phoenix from the ashes, even though that's a cliche, but I just wanted to feel it. I have a long time in recovery and a long time knowing that feelings haven't killed me yet, and they're not gonna.
Thank you for sharing all of that.
Yeah.
How I know that you are like opening up new things, you're reigniting your spark, you're finding your creativity again. How are you approaching this next chapter differently than you did with Murph's?
Hot sauce was something I could do. I love to cook. I was born and raised in Louisiana. I've been cooking since I was a tiny child. It was something very physical that I could have my hands on, right? Selling products is a thing. Though business requires a lot of personal growth, when you're selling a product, you get to distance yourself from the selling of a thing. I wasn't selling Kelly. I'm selling this talent that I had in producing hot sauce. That enabled me to really hide in a lot of ways. I could just let the product speak for itself, but I didn't necessarily have to be anybody special. I didn't have to really know myself really well in order to sell hot sauce. And I was listening to a podcast a few years ago when I was in the funk of Murph's and I'm failing as an entrepreneur and I don't know up from down. And I came across this guy named Dan Sullivan, strategic coach, and he started talking. I listened to a podcast, he was talking about unique ability. And I thought, what the hell is unique ability? And I really liked this idea. I think that I had always had it in the back of my mind and intuitively knew it, that each of us possesses within us a specific combination of personality characteristics, traits, ways of thinking and doing things that if we follow those things, we feel like $1,000,000 when we're doing them, but we can use them to help people. It's something that people have come to us for over time to solve their problem. And that if we really lean into those things, into our 20% unique ability, that we can then go out and live these very productive lives, tapping into our best qualities. Murph's for me over time became like, oh my God, I'm so tired of product sales. Oh my God, I don't care about hot sauce. Oh my God, if I never eat hot sauce again, I would not be sad about it. I hated working in the food industry. It needs so much reform and it's profit hungry and problematic and predatory and poisonous. What I'm doing differently now, the first question is not what can I sell? It's who am I? Now that I know who I am, My communications degree makes a lot more sense. So I thought, oh, I'm going to get a liberal arts degree in communication. That doesn't make any sense. When you examine astrology, I'm a Gemini rising. I'm literally here to be a messenger, to connect people to new ideas, to enable them to transform their lives. So no wonder I had so much fun in my liberal arts degree, right? And love to read, right? I love to write things. I love to public speak. I love to speak on micro levels in groups and other things. And so the first question is, who am I? And what are the skills and talents that I possess that inherently when I'm engaging with them, I feel like $1,000,000. And then I think that the second thing is, okay, if I want to do things that I feel like $1,000,000 when I'm doing them, then what are the things in being the messenger, right? In the connector of ideas that help people change their lives? How can I monetize that? What are people coming to me for most commonly? I really realized when I was looking back at the last 15 years of my life, especially after MRFs, is people come to me for business advice all the time. Even when I was brand new, and it's not because I necessarily knew anything in the initial stages about business, but that I'm a really great thought partner. And when I feel like $1,000,000, I'm talking to somebody about their business, about their personal life, their spiritual journey, some sort of growth they're going through, transition period, and able to just really work and connect with people in a way that enables them to go out and change their lives in some capacity. From a professional perspective, one of my best friends asked me when I was visiting Colorado in February, hey, dude, I need to make $40,000 before I leave for my 6-month trip to Europe on June the 1st. And she has a photography business. It's well established. And I said, yeah, dude, can you put together a list of all of the income you make and break it down by photography type in a spreadsheet? Let's have a 2-hour meeting. He literally sat down and looked at this spreadsheet. And I said, here's the weight of revenue in this model that you wrote out for me. Here's how much you're making from events. Here's how much you're making from portraits. Here's how much you're making from theater photography, your nonprofit work. I was like, this is your money maker. This is where you're making the most amount of money, doing the fewest amount of edits. If you prioritize this and let a couple of these fall to the wayside, delegate this activity and schedule this many things over the next 3 months, you'll make 40 grand. And she did it and she made 40 grand. And so that's the kind of stuff I want to do, is helping people optimize. And it doesn't have to be business. It can be really anything, right? It can be recovery. It can be trauma. It can be spiritual, but just an opportunity to work with people. My favorite part of MRFs is when I was going around selling hot sauce, not because I was selling hot sauce, but because I got to talk to individual people about their lives and businesses. We're going to hang out with business owners and find out what they were struggling with, and an opportunity just to bring some joy, just to bring some transformation, some new ideas. First up, who am I? That's the inspiration for the new future, is doing things I'm really good at as opposed to selling products.
Love that. And I'm a huge proponent of identity work first, because I've worked with so many entrepreneurs over the last 10 years who come in and they're like, oh, I have this great business idea. And I'm like, cool, let's run it through your values. Let's run it through, what do you want to be doing every day? Let's run it through your strengths. Let's run it through, ideas are like assholes. Everyone has them. What's that quote? You can have 10 great ideas before breakfast or whatever. It's like an Alice in Wonderland quote or something.
Yeah.
That's not it. But without that foundation of who am I underneath the good idea is not grounded and rooted. It's not going to be sustainable, because then you're constantly going to be outside of yourself, looking, searching, trying to grasp. Like, you're always going to be operating from a place of lack and scarcity, and it's just not sustainable. That's a very similar journey that I went through when I closed my fashion business. Was I had said forever, oh, I'm a fashion designer. I'm a fashion designer. I'm a fashion designer. And then all of a sudden, when you don't have a fashion business and you're not that anymore, then it's like, fuck,
Yeah.
who am I?
Yeah.
Like, even hearkening back to start with why, it's like we all start with what we do rather than who we are. And we make that our identity. And when that falls away, I said, after I closed my fashion business, I was like, whatever I do next, which happened to be coaching, if the universe tells me to shut it down, I will fucking do it, because I don't need to be attached to a job title in order to have value in the world.
Mm-hmm.
It was a little easier on try 2 of business to walk away from being a coach. First of all, never really identified with the title, but also because it didn't define me. It was something that I happened to do in the world, but it wasn't who I was. I love that distinction, because I think it's one that is not necessarily being made by all of the entrepreneurs in the world. Thank you so much for this. I knew that it was going to be really unique, and I'm just really grateful for your willingness to like share the shit. I think the rags to riches story is just, it's a faulty model, right? Because what it says is that by the time you get to the top of that peak, that's the end of your story. And I think it's so important that more of us share, like 2024 was my biggest year in business yet. And 2025, I was down 80% in my revenue,
Yeah.
right? And that doesn't make me a failure either. I wanted to thank you for the nuance of all of this and the breaking it down, because it's a really potent conversation, especially as our world continues to change and evolve. More and more people are going to be facing these questions and these hard conversations within themselves. I really appreciate your willingness to be bold and go first.
Yeah. Thank you for asking me. I think it's honestly just a relief to, I don't know, to share it out loud and to just say, yeah, so what? I started a company at 26. That's incredible in its own right. And then I had this sort of catastrophic thing happen. And here I am rebuilding myself bigger and better. Ultimately, hot sauce is never what I wanted to do. It was low hanging fruit at the time, and it was a skill I was good at. And now that I get the opportunity to be myself and tap into the things that make me feel like $1 million and do those all day, every day, I honestly can't believe I ever spent that much time doing hot sauce. I'm just really grateful to be here. I'm so grateful that you and I met. I think it was just incredibly kismet for us to have that launch, that random launch through LinkedIn. And yeah, just so excited to be on here with you and excited to see what your 2026 is like.
Same. If anyone wants to connect with you after this or continue following your journey, where is the best place to find you?
You can follow me on Instagram at Kelly Schex, or anyone can email me, kelly@kellyschex.com.
Perfect. So it's SCHEX, and it'll be in the show notes and everything too. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this really special episode. Go have a big goal energy day. And remember, failure's never permanent. It oftentimes means nothing about you. And more than not, it's probably just a redirection into something that's more aligned with your unique abilities. If this episode lit something up in you, share it. Text it to a friend, post it to your stories, or leave a review, because big goal energy is meant to be felt far and wide. And if you're ready to go deeper, explore the tools, hypnosis sessions, and support, because your vision deserves more than hustle, join us on the Big Goal Energy app by visiting your app store and typing in Big Goal Energy. Your vision, your goals deserve alignment, ease, and your fullest self behind them. Until next time, trust yourself, dream bigger, and never forget, you are here for greatness.